Hey y'all, I'm Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming my recent reads video. So I talked about this, I think it was back in my September wrap up, but I talked about how I don't really want to do monthly wrap ups on this channel just because I can read up to like 20 some books a month. And I really like to get rambly with my reviews and my wrap ups. So that's just too many books to talk about in one video. My cat has decided that she wants to join this video. So we're gonna have a cat. Um, 12 to 20 some books is just too many books to talk about in a video. So instead, I decided that I wanted to do recent reads videos about every 6 books. But I have 7 books that I've recently finished, so I thought it was time to film a recent reads video. And I'm just going to go through them in the order in which I read them. So let's just get right into the wrap up. So the first book that I read recently was The Donut Trap by Julie Tu. This is pitched as a like rom-com-esque story following a girl who works at a donut shop. And I think that pitch is not 100% accurate. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I did really like this book. I listened to it on audio, and Natalie Naudus does the narration, and she is absolutely wonderful. So if you do pick this up, I do recommend the audiobook. It is great. It's a great audiobook. But I would not call this a rom-com. I wouldn't even really call this a romance. I would call this a contemporary novel. You are following our main character, Jasmine. And Jasmine is a really messy zillennial. She's, I think, 22 in the story. She's recently finished up college, and she doesn't really know what to do next with her life. She had a really rough end to her college career, and she was going through a lot mentally. And because of that, she feels kind of trapped in her life. She's back working and living with her parents, and her parents own this little donut shop. And the donut shop isn't necessarily struggling, but they're not thriving either. And so she helps come up with a plan to revive her parents' donut shop. And all along the way, she is maybe entering into a relationship with this new guy who she had met back in college, like randomly. And now they re-enter each other's life. And there is while there is a romance in here, it is definitely not the focus of the story. The story is really about Jasmine and her relationship with her parents and coming to terms with like what does she want to do with her life? Where does she want to go next? Like all of these internal struggles more so than the romantic element, especially since like the romance doesn't really move the plot forward. It's more just like a struggle that she is also going through. So it's kind of it's really all about Jasmine's character and like her growth throughout the story with the background of a possible romance. The romance itself is not the focal point. Like they go on, I mean, maybe 2 dates throughout the whole book, and one of them is like a dinner with her parents. So like the focus of the story is much more on Jasmine and her family and her mental health and her personal growth. I thought all of that was really really well done. I just went into it expecting a romance, and that's not really what I got. So I think this is a really good book. I think just go into it with the right expectations. And I will say this is a frustration of mine. I feel like a lot of publishers in that are pitching things as like cute rom-coms, and then you go into it and you're like, but this wasn't a romance. This was a contemporary book. And that's exactly how I felt about this one, where I was like, this was really good, but you set me up for failure by calling it a rom-com because I went in like expecting this like cute fun romance, and I got familial drama. So it's just nothing to do with the book. I thought the book was great. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and therefore mildly disappointed me, I guess. But I did really like this. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cute. I thought it was really well written, and I am excited to read more from this author in the future. The next book I read was The Grimrose Girls by Laura Pohl. This is the first book in a new YA fantasy series, and I gave this one 4 stars. I thought this was a really fun book. This is kind of like a twist on fairy tale retellings. So you are following these 4 friends, and at the start of the book, their friend, like their 5th friend, has just died, and everyone is claiming that it was suicide. And they found her body in a lake, but these 4 girls don't think that that's what really happened. They think something more sinister went down, and you are following these 4 girls, and you get all of their perspectives throughout this book. It is labeled, which I did appreciate, like, at the start of each of their chapters, like, they got a heading, which I liked. But each of the main characters is based off of a different fairy tale princess, and this book is very heavily inspired by a bunch of different fairy tales, especially the darker side of the fairy tales, which I really, really liked. I liked that this didn't, like, fantasize the fairy tales. It took those, like, grim the grim fairy tales and made them dark. And so you are following these girls as they work together to try to figure out what happened to their friend. And all along the way, they are uncovering some dark stuff about their boarding school. So they all attend this really prestigious boarding school called Grimrose, and things might not be exactly what you expect. So I thought this had amazing representation. There's like this entire book is filled with queer characters, with chronically ill characters, with all the representation. It was great. There is a character who has fibromyalgia, and it is on page, which I appreciate. A lot of times chronic illness and disability and stuff are like hinted at, but everything was named in here, which I really, really liked. Like no one was given this like vague history or whatever. Like everything is on page. There's also really good ace representation in here, which I always love. This has ace and aro rep, as well as lesbian rep and bisexual rep and pan rep. It's all packed in here, which I loved. And this is also a really, really fast paced book. So, like, it's kind of chunky. This one is, yeah, like 400 pages, but I think I read this in 2 sittings. Like, I flew through the story. This is written in a really cool way. Like I said, it's multiple POVs, but each chapter is really short. And because of that, like, I was never like dragged down by anyone's perspective because each section was so short, and it would kind of thrillers do this too, where like each one is like a mild cliffhanger, and then you go to the next POV, and then you're excited to get back to all of them because all of them left you wanting a little bit more. And because of that, I just could not put this book down. And I just really like when books are written that way. This had some good twists in it. I wouldn't say it was like the most shocking thing ever. Like you can kind of tell where this book is going the whole time, but I still had a really good time. This got darker than I was expecting it to, which was great to see. And I really liked Laura Pohl's writing. I'm excited for the next book to see where this all goes from here. I loved the friendship group. Overall, I just had a really good time with this one. After that, I read Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood, and this is a gothic retelling of Jane Eyre, but with demons. And this is also a Reese's book club pick if you're into that. And I gave this one 3.5 stars. I was expecting something a little bit different, I guess. I thought that this was going to be more horror, and this is definitely more romance heavy than I thought it was going to be. I was really surprised. Like, I knew it was a Jane Eyre retelling, but when you tell me Jane Eyre with demons, my mind immediately went to this is going to be a really scary book. And there are definitely like some haunting gothic scenes in here, but this was far more like romance heavy than I was anticipating, especially since this is a YA novel. This did read on the older end of YA, I will say. I think the main character is 19, so the characters are a little bit older, and our main character is I'm going to mispronounce this. I did listen to this on audio, and the audiobook is fantastic. Highly recommend the audiobook for this one. But she is a Debtra? I think it's called the Debtra. Essentially, she is someone who can exorcise demons. So she exorcises demons, but she never technically completed her training. She ended up leaving the guy that was training her because he kicks her out and tells her, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, go get married and do something else. But she doesn't want any of that. She really wants to work in this profession. And so she takes this job at this haunted mansion that all of these other people have tried to save and have all fled. And so she decides that she is going to take this job that nobody else wants, and she is going to essentially get herself somebody who can like vouch for her, and so that she can continue to work. And when she gets to the house, she discovers that it is so much worse than what she thought. And this entire mansion is haunted and taken over by all of these demons. And there's all these creepy rules, like you have to be locked into your room by 10 p.m. And she keeps like experiencing all of these like really scary things. And along the way, she meets the guy that owns this mansion. And I think he's also like 19 or 20. And this mansion is haunted because his father was such a terrible person and his father's father was such a terrible person. And so when you are like sinful, so like if you have they say which ones they are, but it's like if you are overly greedy and things like that, essentially those can manifest as demons. And now it's kind of all fallen onto him to save. And so the two of them try to work together to fix up this house. And it's a Jane Eyre retelling, so the two of them have a romance. Like I said at the beginning of this really, really rambly review, this was far more romance heavy than I thought it was going to be. I thought the focus was going to be more on the demons and stuff. And while there is a lot of demon activity in here, the romance is very forefront. And I normally would really appreciate that, but I didn't totally love the romance. I don't even know what it was that held me back. I thought the romance progressed really quickly, and it kind of kept doing this like back and forth thing where it'd be like, "Oh, she is really really into him." And then all of a sudden she'd be like, "But I can't." And then like pull away. And there was no like reason for it other than like, "Oh, well I work for you and I live in your house." Which I get as like a power dynamic is definitely like something that could get in your way. But I just thought that like the back and forth constant and it was always for like the same reason and there was no like exploration of that at all. Like there was no conversation. It was all just like inside her head where she was like, "Oh, but he's my boss." And then she would do something really mean to him and then he would do something mean back to her. And then they would get over it and they would start the cycle all over again. And then finally they were just like, "But we really love each other." And I just thought like it didn't have like a good growth trajectory, I guess. It was very just like back and forth, and then we're in love. And so it just wasn't my favorite romance ever. But I will say this had amazing gothic vibes. Like if you really like the atmosphere of Jane Eyre and that's what you love about that classic, this one I think will work for you. It is very, very gothic, very atmospheric, very dark. I loved the haunted. They're like the hauntings that do happen in here are straight up creepy. So 3.5 stars. Good, just not, again, not quite what I was expecting. Next up, I read An Heiress's Guide to Deception and Desire, which is the sequel to A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem. I gave this one like a 3.5 stars. I did enjoy this. It is a historical romance mystery series. And I love the pairing of mystery and romance. It's why I love the Veronica Speedwell series so much. And so I'm always on the lookout for good historical mystery romances. But with this series, my big qualm is that there is always like this external conflict that I really like. And then everything just kind of resolves itself at like the midway point. And then you're just kind of like reading reading the conclusion to the mystery. And as much as I like the balance of romance and mystery, I wish the romance actually spanned the book instead of the romance being concluded in the first half or like wrapped up, reconciled in the first half, and then just them being together for the second half, which is exactly what happened with this one and happened in the second one. So I thought this was really fun. You are following our main character, Caro, who is the assistant to the heroine from book one. And our hero, Val, is somebody that we also met in book one. And they had a romance back in the day. And for whatever reason, their betrothal ended. And you don't really know at the beginning everything that happened. You know that he hurt her in some way and she called off the betrothal. But he is now set to become a duke. His older brother recently passed away, and so unexpectedly, he is now heir to a dukedom. And she comes from money, but she is not titled. And so the ton kind of looks down on her for that because she is a self-made self-made person. But her family is still like always invited to parties and things like that because they are extremely wealthy. And because of that, they kind of have this strain on their relationship because she thinks that he and his family see her as less than, when in reality he adores her. And so I really liked how he absolutely loves the heroine. Like he adores her so much and he is so sweet. And I really liked that. And I liked that Caro was like strong and independent and like fought for herself. But like I said, the romance just moved really, really fast. Like there were things that would like happen where, for example, the current Duke, so the hero's father, makes a comment about Caro not being like the right person for him because she is not titled. And so the son, the hero Val, was like, "Okay, well, you're wrong." And he like kind of snaps at his dad. And it literally right after the dad's like, "Oh, well, you're right. I shouldn't think that about people." And like it changes his whole tune. And I was like, "You changed your entire perspective in one paragraph." And so like things like that would happen where I'd just be like, things don't reconcile that easily. Like you just change your entire view of the world after one conversation. Really? And so things like that would happen. And like there's a marriage of convenience in here at one point, and pretty much as soon as the marriage of convenience happens, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we're in love." And so it was a little too easy, moved a little too fast. But I do think it's a really fun series. Like I said, Amanda Collins does do a really good job of balancing the romance to the mystery. The romance just wraps up and like you're with them then too soon for my particular taste. I just like the romance to be a little bit more slow burn versus like the conflict of the romance and then just like seeing them be in love. It's just a personal preference for me. I prefer the romance to last a little longer. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. I keep going back and forth on what I want to give it, but I did enjoy this and it was a really fun, quick read. You're gonna see a theme here with my ratings, but next I read Gilded by Marissa Meyer, which is the by the same author that wrote the Cinder series, whatever that series is called. This is not connected to that series at all, but it is another retelling. It's a YA fantasy, and it is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. And I also gave this one 3.5 stars. I did listen to this on audio, and I thought the audiobook was really well done. The narrator does a great job with all the voices and like there's singing in here and she does a fantastic job. And I really liked the retelling and folklore that was in here. I was really surprised how much folklore was jammed into this book. Not only like the Rumpelstiltskin stuff, but there was also like other mythologies and folklores crammed into here. One of the things with the Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale in general is that it is repetitive. So you know the story. The heroine is going to continuously get taken to the spinning wheel, and because of that, this book felt kind of repetitive. By the time that we got to like the third spinning scene, I was just like, okay, I get it. Like we can continue on now. Like I don't need this many spinning scenes. I got it. She can't actually spin gold or straw into gold. Like I know, and because of that, it's long, guys. This book is like 500 pages. It did not need to be 500 pages long. We could have cut some of that out. We could have skipped over it. We didn't need three detailed. And I want to say there's a fourth one as well. There's 3 to 4 detailed spinning scenes in here. I didn't need that much. So she meets the guy that is based off Rumpelstiltskin. His name is Guild, and he's the one that can actually spin straw into gold. And so you get these scenes of them working together, doing their spinning and discussing things. And because you get this so many times and it becomes really repetitive, this book becomes very predictable because the hints that are dropped many times and frequently and heavy-handed. And so by the time that we got to like, I don't know, the third, I was like, well, yeah, like I get where this is going. Like, why are we still dropping hints? Like, why are we still foreshadowing? Like, I get it. I get where this is going. And so it started feeling even more repetitive then because I'm like, okay, yeah, like I get who he is. Like, can we reveal that? And so I felt like as a reader, I was waiting for the characters to catch up to what I already knew was going to be happening. And so I thought the world itself and the folklore and all of that was really cool. And there are these scenes, because our heroine is a storyteller, there are scenes that are told in italics, and they are actually like her telling the story and you were experiencing her story, and I thought that was a really cool aspect. But like I said, I spent a lot of time going, okay, like can we have the characters catch up to what I as a reader now already know? Like we all know the same information, like why is this so obvious for me but not so obvious for the characters? That kind of held me back a little bit. And then I also thought that while there was a lot of time spent with the two main characters, Guild and our heroine, I thought their dynamic, like their relationship dynamic, was kind of lacking. So there is a romance element in here, and you spend so much time on the myth and the folklore and the storytelling and stuff that you don't get a ton of character interaction. They spend a lot of time together spinning straw into gold, but they don't ever like talk to each other other than their storytelling. And then all of a sudden at the end they're like, we're madly in love. And I was like, over stories? You sure? So there were things that I loved about this. Marissa Meyer is a fantastic writer. Like the myth elements in here, so good. But the characters and the foreshadowing wasn't my favorite. It was a little predictable. So in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was fun. It was good. I think I'll continue. I think this is only a duology. I think if it was going to be longer than a duology, I might not continue. But since I think this is going to wrap up in the next book, I think I'll still continue on just so I can know how it all ends. So after that, I read The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling, which was one of my most anticipated books of the year. I also read this for the Literally Dead Book Club, which I think this is November's pick. And I'm giving this one, I think, 2.5 stars. I think I reviewed it as a 3-star book because the first, like, I don't know, third to half of this book was a 4-star read for me. I loved the first half of this book. I think I was like, I don't know, maybe 15% in, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this. This is gonna be like a rave review. And then something happens around the halfway point, and this book took a turn. it made choices, and I didn't love those choices, and the second half was like a 2-star. I really did not like it. This book starts off as like this really cool gothic horror story. So you're following this woman who needs to marry somebody. She has been living with a family who helped raise her in this like fantastical world. It feels very like post World War II esque, but in a made up world. And so you're following this heroine who lost her family in this war, and she's been living with this other family. And they are moving back to the home where she fled, and she does not want to move back there. But she can't stay in her like new town alone. So she needs to get married. And so she does this in a very logical way and finds a doctor, and she's like, okay, like we can get married, but I don't want to live together and I don't want a real marriage. Like I'll work for you. This is just kind of like a trade. And he's like, yeah, cool, fine. He's like, but my one rule is you can never come to my like home. You have to live in this other place. And she's like, okay, fine, whatever. I don't want to like live with you anyways. But on their wedding night, their carriage takes them to his mansion, and she is forced to stay the night in the mansion because there is a mudslide and she cannot get out. While she's at the mansion, she starts learning things that she didn't know about her husband. And that first part of the book was so good. It is so creepy. This house scared the crap out of me. There are things that happen in this book that I was legitimately terrified by. This book has body horror in it that was so gross and so scary. And that first half got me. The second half, however, gets very magical. I was not expecting this book to turn magical, arcane, occult, and it did. And it lost me. It lost me so hard. It got really convoluted and really strange. There was a lot of spell casting, and I wasn't really here. I wasn't really here for that part. I liked the ghost. I liked the ghosts a lot. Those were cool. And there was a cool twist at the end about the ghosts that I thought was really cool, but it lost me so much up until that point that I was like, that's cool, but I wish this wasn't magical. So this book had pros and cons to it. Like I said, I think I reviewed this as a 3-star just because in my head, I'm giving the first half a 4-star and the second half a 2-star. But enjoyment-wise, this was more like a 2.5-star because it dove so hard by the end that by the end I was just like, I don't want to keep reading this anymore. I listened to this one on audio as well. The audiobook was really, really good. I read some of it. I think I read the first half physically and the second half on audio. I think I enjoyed the physical reading experience a little bit more, but the audiobook is well done as well. So if you're curious about that. This one was a bit of a mixed bag. I think there is definitely like there's going to be people who love this book. I just I was here for the gothic aspect of the first part and not so much for the ritualistic magic at the end. So, and then the final book I read is actually my favorite book that I read for this wrap up, and that is King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the author of the Touch of Darkness series, which has kind of been all over TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. But this is her next book, and it is not connected to like the Hades and Persephone world at all. Totally new series. And this one is it's definitely going to get its criticism for being not close to, but like reminiscent of From Blood and Ash. But it has a very, very different plot. Just the setup, I guess, is kind of similar. So you are following a heroine who is a princess of this like kingdom, and the kingdoms are being conquered by the vampires. And so you have this big evil vampire king, and the vampire king comes to their kingdom and they are set to surrender. But the vampire king is like, I'll accept your surrender, but I want to marry your daughter. And so the daughter's like, all right, fine, I guess I'm marrying a vampire king. And they leave the town. And once they leave the town, you start learning stuff about this vampire king, and you realize he and the vampires might not be as evil as everyone thinks, and that like good society has been lying. And so that setup is very similar to From Blood and Ash. But the plot of this is very different. This actually has witches in it, which I thought was a really good surprise. I love the addition of witches that is like coming to paranormal romance. There are not enough witch romances, and I'm really excited to get more of them. This story is not the most expertly crafted. It doesn't have beautiful prose or anything like that, but this book is so fast-paced and so action-packed from cover to cover. I was in it. It's like 400 pages long. I read it in 2 sittings. I was so addicted to this book. It is so addictive. This book, I will say, the like steamy scenes weren't my favorite. There were definitely some parts at the beginning where I was like, what is the purpose of this? There were some steamy scenes in here that I was like, you could have cut this. This didn't need to be in here. And they aren't my favorite. There's a lot of them, but they're really short. So if a personal preference on whether or not you like longer ones that are like more, I don't know, expertly done. These ones are just like quick, quick, dirty, and to the point, but there's a bunch of them throughout. Um, but I really liked this book. As I was reading it, like the whole time, I was like, there are so many. If you are a nitpicky reader, this isn't going to necessarily work for you. There are definitely little elements throughout here where I was like, that probably should have been left out, and this didn't flow quite right. But the plot of this book was so good, and the romance, I bought it up, I ate it up. I love a good misunderstood hero. It was just, this is tropey and fun. If you are a fantasy paranormal romance reader and you just want that like classic paranormal sort of story, definitely give this one a read. It is really, really fun. And I'm excited. I'm excited for more books in the story. This does come out, I think, right at the end of November. I think November 30th, if I'm remembering correctly. So it comes out super soon. Okay, so that is it for my recent reads video. I am hoping to do another one of these before December, but I'm not positive. I do have some vlogs and stuff that are coming as well. So depending on how much I read for things that aren't vlogs, I might not do another one of these until mid-December, because I don't want to repeat books either for these things. Like if I'm doing vlogs, I don't need to do a wrap up for them as well. So that is everything for this video. Let me know if you have read any of these or what your thoughts are on any of these books, and I will catch you all in my next video. Bye!